I did my article analysis on teaching critical thinking by Tim Van Gelder. When researching about the author, Tim Van Gelder, I noticed that he had been researching critical thinking and how to improve these skills for almost 30 years. And his main research and goal was finding a way to enable students to engage in deliberate practices of reasoning skills, which I feel can be applied to any content area and carried with the student into adulthood. And with his experience and research, I just felt as though his article was really credible and a great asset to my scholarly critical thinking paper. It was published in 2005, and so it is a recent article, but not very recent. I definitely think that there are more articles out there that address this topic. And the bibliography contained 21 references that ranged from 1986 to 2004. So I do think it shows a broad variety of different research-based ideas. And one of the articles is actually a previous study that he conducted, and he just used it as reference in this article. The purpose of this article was to provide a conclusion about how critical thinking can be utilized in the classroom with research and theory. And according to the author, students are unaware of their ability to think critically, and we can teach them to reach their full potential as a critical thinker. But first, we need to make them aware of why they should be thinking a certain way in terms of making reasoning an argument, not necessarily an opinion. The main purpose of this article was to educate teachers how to develop general thinking skills and how to later mold them into critical thinking skills, which I think is a really important component of my paper because I'm a first-year teacher and there are a lot of things that I never really would have thought of when implementing these strategies. And I just think that this specific article really resonated with my big area of need in my classroom, which is reading. The article is really well organized and detailed throughout. The author starts off with their beliefs and their understanding of critical thinking and why they feel that way, and then it splits it up into subsections where the reader can learn about different ways to implement each component in reference to how they can become a critical thinker. This really catered to my learning style because I'm an organized thinker and it was really easy for me to follow along. Basically, throughout this article, the author explains how our thinking is guided with reasoning and argument, and as teachers, we can create an environment that engages students in critical thinking while they still have control over their opinions and views. Personally, I thought critical thinking was a natural ability, but the author believes that critical thinking can be a taught skill through repetition and practice, and this would enhance a student's higher order of thinking, which they can use in reading and analyzing text. Each lesson or description that the author writes about leads into the next, and it starts with just basic skills of critical thinking, and then it talks about how practice makes perfect, and by practicing those skills frequently, they'll get better at it. And then it describes students being able to use practice to transfer, and that's when a student is able to apply their new skill to another situation. So in my case, that would be critical thinking when analyzing a text and then using those critical thinking skills and using them in a different component of reading or different aspect of reading. The author also explains in a subsection called practical theory that having knowledge of the theory allows the student to become an expert on what they're doing. And this made sense to me because when a student has all of the bits and pieces of reading, they're able to make deeper connections and apply those later on to another text. And those components can contain fluency, decoding, vocabulary, character development, theme, setting, main idea, all of those good things. The last section of it was map it out, and this was my favorite subsection because the author explains how you can create a reasoning map to help students understand the way that they're thinking and why they're thinking a certain way. And I feel like this can be applied and implemented in my classroom as a graphic organizer or for a tool for a student who could really use that to help further their thinking when trying to organize their thoughts and ideas when it comes to reading. I do think this article was written with bias on the author's experience and research. He never claims that it's all factual, but he does use his own experiences as a tool to educate others. The author discusses biases in the conclusion of the article and acknowledges that when dealing with critical thinking and metacognition, that there's going to be dozens of biases that go along with it, and it's really up to the reader or researcher to look at the evidence, to rate that evidence as quality, and then to stick to personal beliefs, even if what others saying aren't really lining up with what we feel. And the acknowledgement of these biases really helped me connect to the content more because it was easier to see myself implementing these strategies when someone was communicating what worked for them and guiding me in a way that I never really would have thought of on my own. The author does use both facts and opinions when writing this article to inform the readers. He uses information from other studies over his last 30 years to explain how the brain works and why critical thinking is such a tricky component and skill for many students. But then he uses evidence and research from other authors to conduct his own study for best practices that would help teachers and students understand critical thinking better. And this really allowed me to develop new techniques and strategies that I could implement not only in my scholarly paper, but as in my classroom as well. And I do feel like this article could really be applied to any other content area or grade level. And it wasn't content or grade level specific, but I felt that it was the best fit for my article. And it was what I was looking for when I came to find information and knowledge on skill sets as a first year teacher. And that's it.